The Indianapolis Colts had a pretty good 2020 NFL season. Now, they did lose in the first round of the playoffs, but hey, who doesn't like an 11-5 season? Today, let's talk about what's next for the Colts and what they should do in the offseason. Before we do get started though, make sure you hit that like button if you guys enjoyed, as it really helps out the channel. Also, make sure to subscribe so you do not miss out on any new videos. Also, 98% of you guys who watch these videos are not subscribed. 98%! So if you guys enjoy this content, subscribe. Also, we are on the road to 500 subscribers, and once we hit our goal, I will do a reaction to my first 2 videos ever. Also, the daily shout out goes to Sports with Darius and Aiden, so go ahead and check them out. The link to their channel will be in the description below. But without further ado, let's get this video started. And let's start out by talking about the Colts roster, and let's start out with their newly acquired quarterback, Carson Wentz. And Carson Wentz, I mean, I did go over him in the Eagles video, but I'm sure a lot of you guys don't remember what I said, but in case you guys kind of forgot, like, what my thoughts are on Carson Wentz, I mean, the guy was awful last year, we have to admit that. Now, he didn't have great circumstances, but he still played awful, and a lot of it was not his weapon's fault. But even then, I'd say he still has potential to be a good quarterback. This past year, he did pass for 2,620 yards and 16 touchdowns, but also threw 15 interceptions. And he's a really massive wildcard player. He could be really good or be really bad, but more on that later. Jonathan Taylor is the next player I want to talk about, and Jonathan Taylor had an amazing rookie season. He's just one of the best running backs in the NFL already, and in all honesty, he could be a future All-Pro, and probably even a Hall of Famer. He had 1,169 rushing yards, 11 rushing touchdowns, and averaged 5 yards a carry this past year. Michael Pittman Jr. is the next player I want to talk about, and Michael Pittman had a pretty good year. Now, he did only play 13 games, and had a pretty decent year, with 530 yards, 1 touchdown, and caught 66% of his targets. Zac Pascal is the next player I want to talk about, and he had a pretty decent season, with 629 yards, 5 touchdowns, and caught 62% of his targets. T.Y. Hilton is the next player I want to talk about, and T.Y. Hilton, I mean, he isn't the same player he once was, and the guy is aging, but he still had a good year with 762 receiving yards and 5 receiving touchdowns, and he could be someone that they do bring back in free agency. We don't know what happens with him and the Colts, but yeah, more on that later. Denico Autry is the next player I want to talk about, and he actually had a really productive and underrated year for Indy as a run stopper and a pass rusher, with 7.5 sacks and 22 pressures. DeForest Buckner is the next player I want to talk about, and DeForest had a really good year for the Colts when he was traded there, with 9.5 sacks, 2 forced fumbles, and 31 pressures. He is a very big part to this defense, which is very good. Justin Houston is the next player I want to talk about, and Justin Houston had a really good year for the Colts despite, his age, and he's still a really productive player, and he isn't the same player he once was in Kansas City, but even then, he had 8 sacks, 1 forced fumble, and 25 pressures. All I can really say is that he is one of the most underrated players in the NFL. Darius Leonard is the next player I want to talk about, and Darius Leonard might just be the best linebacker in the league. He can stop the run, rush the quarterback, and is also a really good coverage linebacker. He had 3 sacks, 3 forced fumbles, 8 pressures, and 7 passes defended this past year. Xavier Rhodes is the next player I want to talk about, and Xavier Rhodes had a nice resurgence year in Indianapolis, and he is somebody that they may want to bring back in free agency, as he had 2 interceptions and 12 passes defended this past year. Rocky Ya-Sin is the next player I want to talk about, and he had a pretty decent year for the Colts, and he did only play 13 games, but he had 1 interception and 7 passes defended in those games. Kenny Moore is the next player I want to talk about, and Kenny Moore had a really good year for the Colts with 4 interceptions and 13 passes defended. Julian Blackman is the final player I want to talk about, and Julian Blackman had a pretty productive rookie year with 2 interceptions and 6 passes defended, and that will wrap it up for the Colts roster, and the roster is actually pretty good. Now, after Philip Rivers' retirement, we all knew that all they really needed to be a good team was a good quarterback. We know Jacoby Brissett really just wasn't going to be the answer, as he did prove in the 2019 season. He's way more of a really good backup game manager type quarterback. So they went out and traded for Carson Wentz, and many people expected Carson Wentz to be traded to the Indianapolis Colts. Now, as I said before, he was horrendous in 2020, but he's a wild card, as I said before. And I know how good of a quarterback he can be. Like we saw in the 2017-18 season, he was playing at an MVP level. The Colts have an amazing coach in Frank Reich, who's very good at X's and O's, and Carson Wentz really seems to like him, as he was the offensive coordinator of the Philadelphia Eagles during the 2017-18 season, where he played like an MVP. Indianapolis's success, it's really all dependent on the shoulders of Carson Wentz. If he plays like 2020 Carson, they're probably going to be a below average team. But if he plays like 2017 or 2018 or 2019 Carson Wentz, if he plays like a really good player, it doesn't have to be an MVP level. They should be a really good team. However, they will need him to fix his mechanics, as there were a lot of flaws in his mechanics this past year. But if Frank Reich can fix him and he plays well and is just a good teammate, as there were reports of him coming out of him being a bad teammate and all, if he can fix the issues like with his mechanics and all, I have no doubt in my mind the Colts will be a good team, as they have all the pieces, to be a good team. They got a good offensive line, pretty decent weapons, a really good run game, a great coach, and they also got one of the best defenses in the NFL. Now, the Colts do certainly have their weaknesses. For one, they could use some help at the tight end and wide receiver positions. And as I said before, the weapons really aren't that bad. However, they could also use like a little bit of work and improve there. Plus, with Anthony Costanzo's retirement, they could also use some help on the offensive line. But hey, the offensive line, it is not terrible. Luckily, they will have $50 million in cap space this year, and if they restructure Jack Doyle and Grover Stewart, they will save some money, so that is pretty good. The thing is, they will have a lot of important free agents to bring back, and those guys include Justin Houston, Denico Autry, T.Y. Hilton, Xavier Rhodes, and Malik Hooker. Now, I don't think any of those guys will be crazy, $25 million expensive, but they will cost quite a bit. However, if they can retain like 2 to 3 of them, that would be pretty good. Now, that does bring me to free agency, and I do think they should use this period to, help improve this roster, and especially at the receiver position, as they are okay at that position, but they definitely could improve. Now, some targets they could go after include guys like Corey Davis, Will Fuller, Curtis Samuel, or Juju Smith-Schuster, along with Kendrick Bourne, who I think is very underrated. And all of these guys especially would be really good in the event that T.Y. Hilton does leave, as T.Y. Hilton will be a free agent, as I said before. I mean, I would really like to see them keep T.Y. Hilton, as he is, he's a really productive player for this team, along with being a really good veteran leader. The tight end position is also okay. Jack Doyle is aging. Mo Alley Cox was, he's a pretty decent player, but they could use some help at the tight end position. And Hunter Henry and Jonnu Smith, along with Robert Tonyan, they would all be really good options for this team when it comes to the tight end position. And going to the defensive free agents, Adam Butler would be a pretty good player, as he's a really, good run stopper and a pretty decent pass rusher. And I mean, I am a Patriots fan, so I'd really like to see the Patriots bring back Adam Butler. But in the event Denico Autry leaves, Adam Butler would be a pretty solid replacement. So would Leonard Williams, who had a really good year for the New York Giants. Now, they should be careful with how much they do pay him, as he did just have like one really productive year. I mean, he had decent seasons, but there's a chance that this might just be, this past year was only a flash in the pan. And I have said this before in the past, but if this is just a flash in the pan and Leonard Williams doesn't end up producing at this high of a level ever again, I mean, that could be really bad. So be really careful with how much money you do end up paying Leonard Williams if you were to go out and get him. And to help this cornerback position a little bit, if Xavier Rhodes does choose to leave the Colts, William Jackson and Troy Hill, along with Darius Williams, would all be really good options for this team. William Jackson is one of the most underrated cornerbacks in the NFL. Troy Hill, I mean, He's more of a, I guess you could say he's more of a slot corner, but he is still a pretty good player, and Darius Williams would be pretty good. I mean, it should be decently, easy to, pry away these guys from the Rams, as, the Rams are pretty cap strapped. I mean, this video isn't on the Rams, but those are the free agent targets I have on this list. Now, even if the Colts don't hit a ton of home runs in free agency this year, they can still improve through the draft. And luckily, they will own the 21st pick in this year's draft, and that is not crazy high, but they can always look to improve even with a pick like number 21. And some draft targets include guys like Rashawn Bateman, Christian Darrisaw, and Rondale Moore, and maybe if J.C. Horn is available, they could go after him, but I seriously doubt that he is. Christian Barmore wouldn't be bad, especially if Denico Autry does choose to leave. But yeah, I'd mainly go after a receiver unless you have improved that position enough, to the point where you really don't need a receiver, but any weaknesses they can just fill out, using the draft. But to really wrap up this video, the Colts got a pretty good team. They got a really good coach, some pretty decent weapons, a good offensive line, a good run game, along with that, one of the best defenses in the NFL. However, the success does all depend on Carson Wentz, and if he has a good year with the team, they can be very scary and could possibly make a really big playoff run. But with that being said, that'll be the end of today's video. Make sure you hit that like button if you guys enjoyed, as it really helps out the channel. Subscribe if you guys are new and enjoy the content on here so you do not miss out on any new videos. Plus, we are also on the road to 500 subs, and as a special, I will do a reaction to my first 2 videos ever. Also, make sure you guys go ahead and check out Sports with Darius and Aiden. The link to their channel will be in the description below. But with that being said, I'm out, you guys.